Hi, my name is Ed Gonzalez. Today I'd like to demonstrate a couple of custom controls I created that use D3.js to visualize and explore hierarchies directly in IBM Cognos reporting environments. Now, visualizing and exploring hierarchies in IBM Cognos reports is always a tricky proposition. So far, Cognos hasn't really provided any visualizations specifically for viewing and exploring hierarchies. Instead, we generally view one or two levels or branches of a hierarchy with an aggregate of its children. Then we drill to the next level, either through a drill through to another report or a drill up and drill down on dimensionally modeled data. With this in mind, I explored third-party solutions and settled on D3.js for creating my proof of concepts. Now, D3 stands for Data-Driven Documents, and it's basically a JavaScript library for data visualization. Now, the reason I chose to use D3.js is one, unlike other libraries or tools, D3 does not limit us to any particular set of charts or graphs, and we have complete control over the look and feel of our final visualization. Number two, my familiarity and past experience using it. So I've used D3 in the past and I've been very happy with the results. And then finally, number three, there is already a sample custom control that's shipped with Cognos that proves it does work within the IBM Cognos analytic reports. Now, we get this flexibility and control because we're basically building our visualizations from scratch or from the ground up, which means you do need to have JavaScript experience and knowledge of D3.js to build these visualizations. Now, once a visualization is complete, a power user should be able to use it fairly easily. So during the initial development, it's going to be a developer creating these custom controls. And the complexity of creating them is pretty hard. As I mentioned before, you do need to have that JS and D3 knowledge. And if not, the learning curve for D3 can be kind of steep. However, once a control is created, a power user should be able to drop a custom control onto a report and set a few properties to get it working. And then finally, once you already have a custom control built using D3.js, you should be able to change it fairly easily to meet new requirements in different reports. Now, of course, the difficulty there is going to depend on the complexity of the new requirements. Now, that being said, let's go back to the first column, or initial development. As I mentioned before, because we're using JavaScript to build these visualizations, we are generally building them from scratch. But the good news is that there are a lot of code samples and tutorials out there on the web to help get us started. And then as far as code samples go, if we go directly to the D3.js webpage, we can see that they have an examples page. If we click on that and follow the link, we can see a gallery of visualizations that other people have already created and that were kind enough to share the code with us. So we can use these visualizations in three separate ways. First, we can use them for inspiration. So we can take a look at all of the visualizations they have here and get an idea of what D3 can do and what some things that we might want to incorporate in our reports. Number two, we can use the code that's contained in these visualizations for our learning. So we can dig into the code, pick it apart, see how users are setting the axes, how users are pulling in data, how they're changing colors or resizing the graphs. So we can dig deep into D3.js code to see how it works and help us to learn. And then finally, in the way we're going to use it today, is we can use this code as a basis for starting our visualizations. So we can tap into the code that's already here and use it to build on so that we can create our custom controls in Cognos Analytics. So looking through these samples here, we can see that there are plenty of different ways of visualizing hierarchies. The two that I chose for my proof of concepts are, first, a collapsible tree. Now, this is a sample built by Mike Bostock, who's actually one of the principal designers of D3.js. He's been kind enough to create a few examples and put them out here in the gallery. So on the top, we can see what the visualization looks like, and we can actually get a feel for how it works. And then below, we can see the code used to build that visualization. And as I mentioned before, we can dig through this code to see how Mike built this visualization and get an idea of how we can parse it over to our Cognos Custom Controls. The second one that I'm going to take a look at is the zoomable Sunburst. Now, while the tree was pretty self-explanatory, this one is also pretty easy. You can see that we start off at the middle, it's our root, and as we go out farther, we can see the children. And the larger the sections means the higher the value. So as we see here, in the center we have operator, and on the outer rings, we can see which one is the biggest, which happens to be layout. And again, we can take a look at the source code underneath and figure out how we're going to parse it and port it over to Cognos Connection. Now, I really would love to be able to say that this is just a slam dunk, that we can just copy this code, move it over to Cognos, and be done with it. The truth is that we do need to parse this code and to reformat it into a format that the Cognos Custom Controls are expecting. In addition, we want to understand what's going on in this code for two reasons. One, so that we can connect our data to it from Cognos, and two, so that we can update this visualization to meet our requirements. Even at the beginning here, even though this is a pretty cool looking visualization, I'm pretty sure we're going to want to add some features to it to meet our requirements. So that being said, I'm going to go ahead and jump right into the Cognos portal so we can take a look at the two proof of concepts that I've already created. So I'm going to go to the Cognos portal, and I'm going to start out by opening up a template that I created earlier under My Samples D3 template. So I'm going to run this report, and this report basically contains a simple list with hierarchical data. I basically took the geographic data from the sites or the stores that are contained in the Go Sales sample database. And we can see that we have region, country, state, city, and then finally the revenue. This is pretty simple. I chose to use geographic data because that's a hierarchy that most people are familiar with. The only thing that I added here at the report level is this column here, all. So I needed to create a root level for our hierarchy so that everything can aggregate up to one specific object. And in this case, I'm calling that root all. So let's go ahead and jump right into our page design. Bring up page design here. And as I mentioned earlier, the goal is to create these custom controls so that they're fairly easy to use. So a power user can simply drop the control onto the page and set a few properties to get it going. So in this case, there's two properties I want to set on this side here. And the first one is going to be UI with event propagation. Because because we are going to be clicking around in the visualization, we're going to do some highlighting and drilling onto it. We want to make sure that the events propagate correctly. The second property that we want to set over here is the module path. And this is the path to the actual JavaScript file that I create, that's based off of the visualization we saw in the gallery. So I put the path in there. And then finally, and probably most important, is that we need to set the data that we're going to use to build this visualization from. So I'm going to change the query for this data set to query 1 so that it's the same query as our list report. Now I do that only so that I don't have a lot of queries floating around in my report. And then also, we don't really need this table on here. We can pass this information directly to visualization or to custom control without this table. I am keeping it here because I'm going to actually incorporate it as part of my visualization. So we bring over our hierarchy in order from top to bottom. So I started with all, my root. Then we'll go ahead and let's bring in region, country, province or state, city, and then finally the revenue. Okay, now before I go any further, I just want to once again reiterate here that it was only a couple of properties that I set. I dropped the custom control in, I set my query for my data, and then I set the UI type, and the path to the module. We do have a configuration that we can use, but I pretty much am handling all the configuration right within my code itself. There's also height and width. Again, I'm handling that within my code itself, so I don't have to set that here. So that's all. 3 properties: UI type, module path, and my data set. With that, let's go ahead and run this report. So I click on it, and you can see that it comes up right away. First thing we notice, of course, is that the look and feel of the report has changed. I'm handling the look and feel in my custom control, and that's just so that I can maintain a consistent look and feel. Every time this custom control is going to be used, it's going to format the report in a specific way. And again, that's just to maintain consistency. The important thing, however, is the actual visualization. And the first thing we can see here is that it looks pretty much the same as the visualization we saw out in the gallery page. So I used this one as a starting point to build this one. And I added a few additional features. First thing I added was I tied the visualization to my list report. So as I hover over, we can see that I start to build a breadcrumb on my table. And each one of these sections represents a region. The inner circle does, that is. The center circle is the all, and the inner circle is the regions. The next one up is state. So it went from all to Americas to United States, and then to California. And we can see here that as I highlight it, the information for the object that I'm hovering over is listed in the center of the Sunburst. And so it's California, and then the amount of revenue, 137 million and some odd change. And then on the list report, we can see that we started to build a breadcrumb. It goes from all Americas, United States, California, and we can see the individual cities underneath. And those are up here: Los Angeles, San Diego, San Francisco. And we can see that as we go around, we can see that it is pretty responsive. As we hover over, the information changes and our breadcrumb changes fairly quickly. So the other option that we have here is we can drill into it, or we can zoom. By clicking on these individual spots here, so I can click on United States, we can see we zoom to we zoom to America, and now we only see the children of the Americas region. And we can go down a little bit further. If I click on the United States, we zoom into the United States, and now the only thing we see around the sides here are the states for the United States. Finally, we can click on California. Once again, notice the breadcrumbs on the left-hand side, but on the pie chart, we can see we're zoomed in to California, and we can see the children of California, the cities: Los Angeles, San Diego, San Francisco, Anaheim, and so forth. And then we can zoom back out very easily by clicking on the center here, and take us all the way back out to all. And that's pretty much it for the Sunburst. So as a proof of concept, I showed that I can pull in a D3 chart, the Sunburst, recreate the Sunburst, and add a few additional features to make it a little bit more usable in our Cognos reports. Other features that we can add down the line would be maybe some labels, changing colors, and so forth. But all that's going to depend on the type of requirements I get down the line whenever somebody asks for this type of chart. So with that said, let's go ahead and jump right over to our tree. I'm going to go ahead and close out this template. Okay, so let's go ahead and open up that template one more time. Again, it's under my samples, D3 template. Here we go. And again, we can see it's the exact same report that we used for the Sunburst custom control. So let's jump right into our page design here. And then we're going to follow basically the exact same steps. We're going to drop our custom control right onto the page. set a couple properties. First one, of course, being UI with event propagation. Let's go ahead and copy over our path. Now this is a different path, of course, to a tree.js. Hit OK there. And then, of course, most importantly, let's set our data. Again, I'm switching this over so that it points to the same query that we use for our table. Again, not necessarily needed, but I do it just to minimize the number of queries I have floating around. So we got categories here. Again, we're going to put these in order, top down. All, region, country, state, city, and then finally revenue. And we can see, just as with the Sunburst custom control, I was able to do this by setting just a few simple properties in order to get this to work. And that's because all the hard work was done on the back end in creating the custom control. So let's go ahead and run this now. Okay. So very first thing we can see is, once again, my custom control is handling the look and feel as far as the colors and so forth. But once again, if we look at our tree here, our visualization, we can see that it looks pretty similar to the original one. I think I would have it open to about that level there. And if we look at it, we can see that we made only a few slight modifications to the way it looks. And that's basically colors of the fonts, the dots themselves. I did add some colors to the dots. The colors right now don't signify anything. They're not representative of any value right now. They're simply there to show as a proof of concept that we can add colors to those dots. Perhaps in some future iteration, those colors could represent values. Right now, they're just randomly being assigned to the dots. Again, we have our table on our left-hand side that I am going to still use for our breadcrumbs. So as we hover over individual dots, we can see that that the line to our node is highlighted, so that as we drill down, it's easier to follow the lineage of our hierarchy. But also on our table, we start creating a breadcrumb so that we can preview what's on the next level. So we can see here, if we would take Asia Pacific here, you can see that first of all it gets highlighted. Asia Pacific gets put onto our breadcrumb. We click down a little bit. Click down. So we go to Australia. Now we can see under Australia we have a preview of the data that's under Australia, along with the lowest level revenue and of course the full aggregate. We click down again. If we were to go to this one here, we can see that we have two cities under there, Brisbane and Cairns, and we can see the values for those. And then, as I said before, you can see that our lineage is highlighted, so we can follow that very easily. And that's particularly helpful once we start getting a lot of stuff open here, to be able to follow our lineage all the way through. And as we open more and more stuff, we can see that we do get a little crowded here. So one of the other features that I added to this was zooming and panning. So I found that D3.js has a library or some functions to handle that natively. So I was able to incorporate that here. So simply by moving my mouse wheel up and down, I can zoom in and out, and then by holding the mouse down, I can pan right and left. Now, one thing that you might have noticed here is that the space or the window for this visualization is kind of small. So I also added a full screen button. So if I do that, we hide our table, and now we have a little bit more room to play with. And then of course we can scroll back down. And then that's pretty much it. We'll take the full screen back off, put that back there, back to normal. And now we can see what our tree looks like in Cognos reports. And that's pretty much all I have for this here. With this, I was able to show that we could bring in the D3.js tree right into Cognos reports, and again, add a little bit more customization to it to make it a little bit more useful. And that, of course, is just scratching the surface. Once I work with some of the stakeholders, maybe some of the power users, we could change this around and add more features or remove some features, whatever the case may be. So back to our slides here. Let's get all the way to the end here. So in conclusion, we were able to see that D3.js is a very powerful tool, and it definitely works well within Cognos Analytic reports. You do need to have JavaScript experience and knowledge of D3 in order to use it, in order to port D3 visualizations into Cognos Custom Controls. But once those custom controls are created, the power users should be able to use them fairly easily. And how easy it is for them is going to depend on how much complexity the developer pushes back up to the report level. Now, if you're still new to JS or to D3, you can still find plenty of tutorials online. And as I showed you before, there are plenty of samples available, particularly on the D3.js official website. But even still, if you get to that point and you're stuck and you need some help, either with a question or actually building some of these custom controls, feel free to contact me. You can either leave me a note in the comments section of the video, or you can email me directly. And then finally, the source code for these two custom controls. I do have those, and I will make those available to everyone. I just want to make sure that I'm getting enough response. There was a very big disconnect in the previous videos between how many subscribers and likes I got compared to how many requests I got for the source code. So this time around, I want to set a goal for 101 subscribers. Once I reach 101 subscribers, I'll go ahead and I'll package up the source code for these two examples and make them available out on GitHub. So if you're interested in getting that source code, make sure that you subscribe to this channel. That's it for today. I hope you enjoyed the video, and I hope it inspired you to give D3.js a try, or maybe even create some of your own custom controls. Thank you very much.